Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where we recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 29th of November, 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So apologies for missing yesterday's episode, everyone. It was kind of late notice, but I did give notice in the Daily Gwei Discord channel. If you're in there, you'll know whenever I plan to miss an episode. But yeah, sorry about that. But we're back into it today, of course. And the first thing I think that's worth talking about is I guess I wouldn't really call it FUD, but I guess the topic of what happened around a wrapped ether or WETH over the last few days. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is not because I think any of you watching or listening needs to maybe have clarification on this, or maybe you do. I'm not sure, obviously, but the reason I want to bring it up is because it really got out of hand, which was kind of wild to me. So basically what happened was that people were making jokes about how wrapped ether was insolvent, or that it was suffering from a hack, or it was going to zero and then there could be a bank run. You know, all the same things that we've heard for other things in crypto that actually turned out to be true, right? Such as FTX. So obviously the joke wasn't really taken as a joke by many people, especially people that don't understand how wrapped ether works, and they thought that there was something wrong with it. Now, I participated in these jokes, in this shit posting, and I apologized for it as well, because I just really underestimated the fact that people would take this seriously. So, with that background out of the way, I do want to quickly break down why something being wrong with wrapped ether is extremely unlikely, and why it's actually different to other wrapped assets on Ethereum, such as wrapped BTC or WBTC. So, how does wrapped ether work, and why do we even need it in the first place? Well, the way it works is that wrapped ether is a contract that lives on the Ethereum network. That contract basically has only 62 lines of code. It is extremely simple. It's an extremely simple smart contract. And what those lines of code do is basically allow you to convert ETH into an ERC20 token, or at least make it so that it adheres to the ERC20 token standard that we all know and love, right? All the tokens on Ethereum, or at least most of them, adhere to the ERC20 token standard. And then it lets you unwrap that as well. But basically, all it does is take in the ETH, store it in the contract, and issue you the corresponding wrapped ether. It doesn't do anything else with it. The contract itself can't actually do anything with it. It doesn't have any lines in its code to allow it to do anything with the ETH except wrap and unwrap based on the amount of ETH given to it. So if you want to go and redeem, you would basically bring one wrapped ETH and you would get one ETH back. That's it. There's nothing more to it. That's as simple as it is. Now, why is this a thing? Why is wrapped ether even a thing? Well, because ETH is the only, sorry, I shouldn't say only, but ETH is, as an asset, does not adhere to the ERC20 token standard because it came before ERC20. ERC20 was actually invented as the token standard after the Ethereum network went live, and ETH doesn't adhere to that. So because of that, ETH can't really be used natively within a lot of these DeFi protocols and other such things. So to use it natively, you wrap it and turn it into wrapped ETH, and then it unlocks all the relevant ERC20 functions, because it is now because wrapped ETH is an ERC20 token, right? It adheres to that standard. So because of that, and because of it being so simple, the chances of this being something wrong with wrapped ether are extremely unlikely. It is not possible for there to be a bank run on wrapped ether. It is not possible for it to be insolvent. It is not possible for the wrapped ether contract to lend out the funds to anyone else, right, or anything like that. But that's assuming that the wrapped ether contract is functioning as it's programmed to do, which it has done for as long as it's been around for. There's never been a bug, as far as I know, that in wrapped ether. I think if you really want to dive deep into it, there is a very technical thing that someone put a thread out the other day about wrapped ether that basically means that there's one way. So one way is literally like the smallest denomination of ETH that is, I think, stuck in the contract one way, which is obviously like beyond a rounding error. It's something not even worth worrying about, and it was due to some esoteric thing, but it doesn't have any bearing on the collateral in backing up the wrapped ether, right? So the only way there could be something wrong is if for some reason the wrapped ether contract was exploited, and that exploit would have to be something like taking all the ETH out of the wrapped ether contract so that the wrapped ether token wouldn't be able to redeem the corresponding ETH. Now, as I said, the wrapped ether contract has been around for a very long time. It has a massive honeypot. There's like $4.5 billion worth of ETH just sitting in there. So if there was to be an exploit, it probably would have already been exploited. And as I said, because it's only 62 lines of code, it's very, very easy to audit it, very easy for anyone to really read. Even if you're not a coder, you can actually read that contract and get some sense of an idea about what's going on with it. But basically, and it's very easy to formally verify, and obviously there's been tons of eyeballs on it, both because of the honeypot and also because of how intrinsic it is, or sorry, how important it is to the rest of the Ethereum ecosystem. So yeah, if you saw any of this FUD or any of this WETH stuff over the last few days, just know that it was all jokes. There is nothing wrong with wrapped ether. As it currently stands, I don't expect there for there to be anything wrong with it for the reasons I just outlined. And on a final note here, I do want to say that I do realize that, you know, shit posting, sarcasm, joking doesn't really come across with text. And I've learned this lesson many times over the past few years being on Twitter. I do tend to shit post a lot on Twitter and make jokes a lot. I don't know. It's just something I do for entertainment. It's fun for me. I keep the educational, serious stuff for the refuel. But I think going forward, I'm going to be more careful about it because I honestly didn't realize like how sensitive people were to these things. And I should have, because the fact of the matter is that there's a lot of new people in the ecosystem, even in the bear market, and obviously due to all the fallout that we've seen from things blowing up, they're a lot more sensitive to this stuff now. Like anything that people call out as being FUD or call out as being wrong, immediately people are skeptical of that because there has been things that have been called out as FUD, like Celsius blowing up, like FTX blowing up, and it turned out to be true. So I totally understand that. But yeah, the joke seemed to take on a life of its own. It even got covered in like Bloomberg. I was like, what the fuck? Like, why is it covered in Bloomberg? But anyway, lesson learned. Hopefully, the way I just explained how it works is educational for you and you get a better understanding of it. But that's why it is different to things like wrapped Bitcoin, which I should explain actually. So wrapped Bitcoin is basically an IOU. It's not a smart contract. So what ends up happening is that if you want to wrap your BTC, your native BTC from the Bitcoin network into wrapped Bitcoin, an ERC20 token on Ethereum, you send that BTC into the custodian, which is BitGo. They issue a corresponding wrapped Bitcoin to you on the Ethereum network, and that's it. All the BTC is actually custodied by BitGo. It's not custodied by a smart contract. So BitGo is the ultimate source of that BTC. So if something happens to that BTC in BitGo's vaults, for example, on the Bitcoin side, the WBTC IOU would be worthless because there's nothing backing it up. It's like how I've explained bridges before, how when you go to another chain, you bridge your asset to another layer one, it's an IOU because the asset's still living on Ethereum. Whereas because Bitcoin is a separate network to Ethereum and you're bridging across your BTC, all you're getting is an IOU. You're not literally taking your BTC with you. And there has been other attempts at basically giving you BTC where it's basically permanently locked, or it's called HTLC, I think, hash time lock on Bitcoin. I'm probably saying that wrong, but there has been other attempts at doing this in a more trustless way where you didn't have to trust the custodian, going from Bitcoin to Ethereum. But yeah, wrapped Bitcoin is by far the biggest solution out there. And the reason why wrapped Bitcoin is very, very different to wrapped Ether is that difference in what it uses for custody. Wrapped Ether, all the Ether backing it, is custodied by the smart contract that anyone can audit the code for. As I said, the code is extremely simple. It's been around for a long time. You know, there is I'm not going to say 0% chance, but there is basically a 0% chance of anything being wrong with that. Whereas on the wrapped BTC side of things, BitGo custodies all that BTC. So if anything was to happen to that custody, then the WBTC, a portion of it or all of it would be worthless on the Ethereum side. Now, the thing is that if the wrapped Bitcoin on the Ethereum side gets stuck, or I get seized, or I don't know, maybe not get seized, but get stuck, what can happen is that BitGo can, or the WBTC custodians can basically freeze that and then just reissue it. Just like how Tether can reissue Tether, depending on if it gets stuck or it gets lost or whatever, someone sends it to the burn address accidentally. The ultimate source of collateral is on the Bitcoin side, is in the BitGo custody vaults. Whereas with Ethereum, if someone loses the wrapped ETH, so say you send one wrapped ETH to the burn contract, well, that one ETH in the wrapped Ether contract is stuck there forever. There's no way to actually get that out now because you've burned the thing that was the IOU token. Because technically, WETH is an IOU token for the ETH, but because it's in the smart contract and because you can verify that it's there, you don't have to trust anyone, right? It's actually truly trustless and decentralized. So yeah, hopefully that explains all of that and the differences between those things. I'm going to leave that one at that and move on to the next thing, which was some news out of Binance. So this happened a few days ago, but Binance has released their proof of reserve system that they've spoken about. And as you can see here, Tree of Alpha says, starting with BTC, every user can verify the assets they own on Binance using a Merkle tree. And then Jesse Powell said, "I'm sorry, but no, this is not proof of reserves. This is either proof of reserves. This is either ignorance or intentional misrepresentation. The Merkle tree is just hand-wavy bullshit without an auditor to make sure you didn't include accounts with negative balances. The statement of assets is pointless without liabilities." So and then Jesse continues, I should say, by saying, this is simply, here's a hash of your record in the BTC spreadsheet. Okay, but what's the point? The whole point of this is to understand whether an exchange has more crypto in its custody than it owes to clients. Putting a hash on a row ID is worthless without everything else. And this is a very important point that I think more people need to be aware of. As I've explained before, proof of reserves is good because it gives us more than we've had in the past. It's also good because we get to actually see which addresses these exchanges control and use, and that's good for cataloging and things like that. But in terms of knowing whether an exchange is solvent or not, proof of reserves is nowhere near enough because you don't know what their liabilities are. So for example, say an exchange has $1 billion worth of reserves. Okay, that's fine. What if they have $2 billion worth of liabilities? Well, they're actually net negative $1 billion. So their proof of reserves is all well and good, but if they can't pay those liabilities, those reserves go, and if for some reason they file for bankruptcy, those reserves don't mean shit. Those reserves get part of the bankruptcy process, and they probably get used to pay back those liabilities. So at the end of the day, if you don't know what the liabilities are, which is pretty much impossible to know on chain, then a proof of reserves Merkle tree is kind of pointless, because you can say, oh yeah, I have $1 billion worth of Bitcoin. Here's my address here's the exchange address that they're being custodied on, and here's proof, and basically showing the proof on chain. That's fine, but can you prove that you don't have more than $1 billion of liabilities issued against anything? You could have lent out money, right? You could have you could have lent out money. You could have borrowed money. You could have done something funky with other assets that you own. All these sorts of things can happen, right? And we saw how it plays out with FTX. So it's not enough to have proof of reserves at all. And honestly, so I shouldn't say it's not enough to have proof of reserves. It's not enough to have proof of assets. True proof of reserves is assets minus liabilities. And if you still have all the assets there, especially customer deposits, after you pay down your liabilities, or after you account for liabilities, then you have a proper proof of reserve system. But as I said, it is impossible to prove your reserves on chain because there is no way to prove your fiat things on chain. For example, you can't prove to someone that you don't have $1 billion of fiat liability. You can't prove a negative. And I mean, you can say as much, but you can't prove it because we still have to trust you, right? But that's why, in the traditional finance system, people get third-party audits and things like that as well. But even third-party audits can't be trusted, as we saw from the 2008 financial crisis. There were third-party audits, but it turns out that they were getting kickbacks for giving good audits to junk bonds and kind of like junk assets and junk mortgages. So when you look at it from that perspective, DeFi looks even better because DeFi can actually do proof of reserves, because you can actually look on chain and see which protocols are actually solvent and which ones are not, which ones have bad debt, which ones do not. Like last week, we saw Aave experienced a kind of attack of sorts on its system, and it ended up with about $1 million, I think, of bad debt. But you can see that, and you can prove that on chain. There's no need to trust anyone there, but there's no way for us to do that off chain or and in CeFi. There's always an element of trust there. Whereas because DeFi, truly decentralized finance, I should say, is trustless, is on-chain, is available for everyone to verify, you can see what's happening in real time. And you know what's even funnier? You can actually see immediately when something's been hacked. Whereas in CeFi, the platform can get hacked and you probably won't, there's a potential for you not to know for a very long time. This actually happened with MT Gox. They were bleeding BTC for a long time against their liabilities, which were customer deposits. And they were trying to make it back. They had this bot that was running. It was all manner of kind of craziness that was going on, right? And that only came out months and months later. Whereas in DeFi, you know instantly if something's been hacked because someone calls it out instantly. All you have to do is look on chain and instantly you're aware of it. And that to me is another massive value prop. Yes, obviously we don't want there to be hacks in DeFi, but I think the value prop is in being able to see what's happening on chain, being able to follow the money, so to speak, and not having to rely on anyone, not even third-party auditors who are supposed to be legit and who you can supposedly trust. it's all about building a trustless financial system, not building one that you have to trust, certain parties still. So yeah, I'm glad Jesse called this out because it's a very important point. And I think that when discussing proof of reserves in the future, you always need to say that it's assets minus liabilities. If you just want to prove assets, that's fine. Call it proof of assets, but that doesn't really give you much, as I just explained. And on this note as well, Coinbase also have put out a blog post titled How Crypto Companies Can Provide Proof of Reserves, and they've also announced a $500,000 developer grant program to encourage others here. And the TLDR of this blog post is that as a public company, Coinbase already proves our reserves using our audited financial statements. We're also exploring various novel ways to prove reserves using more crypto native methods and are announcing that developer grant program. On-chain accounting is the future, but as we discussed in this post, there are pros and cons to the various ways this can be implemented today, which you can give a read. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But again, right, like they're saying here, Coinbase already proves our reserves using our audited financial statements. That's fine, right? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with their audited financial statements. And I think Coinbase is obviously legit. But again, you're trusting those financial statements. You're trusting that the auditors have both done their job properly, have been truthful, aren't trying to obfuscate anything, and that everything's above board and they don't have any rogue employees doing dodgy things or anything like that, right? So it's obviously much better to have the audited financial statements than not, but still, it doesn't even come close to the value prop of being able to audit the things yourself and verify it for yourself on chain without you having to rely on anyone else. And that, as I just explained, that's the power of DeFi and on-chain finance there. But yeah, you can give this blog post a read. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, so this might be old news now, but we all saw the Metamask stuff from last week, Metamask Infura stuff from last week that I covered on Friday's Refuel. But Mystic Ryujin here put out a great tweet thread where he said, so Metamask says, quote unquote, just don't use Infura. So let's see how easy Metamask makes it to quote-unquote, not use Infura. Part 1, installation. The first two screens are straightforward here. They seem to provide a clear privacy policy. That's good. And then he continues this thread by walking through creating an account on Metamask. Now, the most egregious thing about Metamask is the fact that it does those batch sends, right? Where it basically batches all your addresses together with an IP address, all your Ethereum addresses with an IP address, and sends that straight to Infura in order to do things that improve the user experience, such as showing balances of tokens and things like that, right? But that is obviously a very easy way to dox you in all the addresses that you use because it's sending it all as one batch thing. It's tying it to an IP address. And if you have your public.eth linked to your controlled via your MetaMask, well, then that's going to be linked to all your other addresses, and there goes all your privacy from, I guess, Infura and MetaMask. And if they're logging that, then that could potentially become a thing later on where maybe they get hacked and that gets leaked and it becomes really bad for privacy. So that's the main thing. But yeah, I mean, I suggest giving this thread a read because it goes through how you can change your RPC, but it's kind of useless because you can't change it before you create an account. So instantly you're sending all your data to Infura anyway, and you can't actually remove Infura from your MetaMask. You still have Ethereum mainnet when you have your list of drop-down RPCs. You can, of course, add your own, but you can't remove Ethereum mainnet from the extension. Now, I'm sure Metamask is probably working on ways to remove it, given this public outcry, and hopefully they're working on ways to avoid that batch sending to, the potential docs vector there. But still, I think it's worth giving this thread a read. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to check out. All right, so the other day, Protocol Guild had its 1-year anniversary. So they said today, Protocol Guild is 6 months into the 12-month pilot. Yeah, I should say that they started the Protocol Guild, I guess, initiative in terms of getting something spun up, which eventually became the Protocol Guild, on October 29th, 2021, so over a year ago now. But on November 26th, they say, today, Protocol Guild is 6 months into the 12-month pilot with $10 million vesting to 109 core Ethereum contributors. Updates coming soon. Stay tuned. Planning what PG V2 will look like. And then you can view the dashboard as well, which I'll link in the YouTube description below. But this is so awesome. Someone said this in the Discord channel today about Protocol Guild, and I think it was Frozen Fire. He said that basically what the protocol did was that it made core Ethereum contributors unionize, basically. So they're not just reliant on these big organizations like the Ethereum Foundation and Consensus and some others out there to fund them. They basically said, well, no, we're going to take our funding into our own hands, and we're going to basically create this protocol guild thing. We're going to be a part of it. We're going to get the projects in the ecosystem to buy into it, to basically donate to it, and then we're going to vest out this money to core contributors in order to get them paid for their work. And I think it has worked wonders. I mean, there's already $10 million vesting, and this is just the pilot program to 119 core Ethereum contributors. And I think that works out to about $80,000 each. It's not weighted the same for everyone. There are people who get more weight than others. As obviously people do more, contribute more to Ethereum core development than other people do. But yeah, I mean, that's a huge amount of money going to the contributors of the protocol that we all know and love. Now, is it enough? No. And I think the Protocol Guild is targeting $1 billion. Like, they really want to get to $1 billion. $10 million is the pilot. Hopefully they can keep 10xing that, right? Go to 100 million next, then go to $1 billion, potentially even 10 billion one day. And that would be amazing because it means that these core contributors don't have to rely on the Ethereum Foundation. They don't have to rely on Consensus. They don't have to rely on going and getting outside funding from elsewhere. And it'll make it a much healthier core development ecosystem. As I said, it'll make it like they've unionized, which I think is very, very powerful because they not only have the money, they also have more bargaining power where they can basically say, well, you know what? I don't care if you don't pay me, right? And maybe one of these companies that are funding them says, "Hey, we want you to implement this, or we want you to push for this," and the team says, "Well, we don't feel comfortable doing this," and then the organization says, "Well, we're not going to fund you if you don't do this." They can say, "Well, screw you guys, we're going. We'll get funding from Protocol Guild." So it works as a deterrent for that as well. Not that I think that's going to happen, but it doesn't matter if I think it's going to happen or not. It has a chance of happening, right? There's always a non-zero chance of happening, so it acts as a deterrent while also rewarding core contributors. So, I mean, as you guys know, Protocol Guild is one of my favorite things in the ecosystem. I've donated to them through my NFT drop. Well, actually, no, the NFT drop that I did for the Daily Gwei 1 year anniversary went to a similar effort to the Protocol Guild because it's also paying out core developers. But I also sent some tokens from SSV Network that I got recently to Protocol Guild. I didn't announce that because I didn't want to make a fanfare about it. I think it was worth $10,000 to $15,000 at the time or something. But I donated that straight to Protocol Guild because I didn't want it. And then I've mentioned before, once I get hopefully, if I get voted into the Rocket Pool ODAO and start accruing the rewards there, I can pass them onto the Protocol Guilds as well. So you guys know I'm a public goods funding maximalist. I love giving money back to the ecosystem, and the Protocol Guild is one of the best places we have to do that. So yeah, congrats to them on being 6 months into the 12-month pilot. Looking forward to seeing this 10 million number go up and up and up. All right, so we've got a new little, I guess, like tool here from 0xNGMI who says, now you can check which RPCs track your IP on Chainlist. So Chainlist basically is a website here you can go to, chainlist.org/chain/1, which basically shows Ethereum. And on here, you can see that they've gone through all the RPCs and checked their privacy policies manually. Then we simplified those into simple badges. So green doesn't track IP, orange, limited tracking, red tracks your IP, and none, no definitive statement. I think this is really cool because basically you can see which ones have a really great score. So the only one that has a definitive a statement on green on privacy and green doesn't track you is this one here, which is nodereal.io. So this is their ETH mainnet. The other ones that have a green score here, that don't track your IP, I should say, are these other ones here. So there's a few, this list keeps refreshing. There's a few here, but a lot of them don't offer very much privacy, unfortunately. But you can use one RPC, which I think is 1 inch's RPC there, and NodeReal's RPC, which seem to be the two that don't track you and respect your privacy here. But I think that orange is, what was orange? Limited tracking. So limited tracking could involve not tracking your IP at all. And they've actually got their policy here. When you highlight it, it shows you exactly what the policy is. So I'm not going to read them all out. You can go check this out for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below, but great to see that the community came together to develop such a tool so quickly because, I mean, as I said before, the Metamask Infura stuff is something to be taken seriously. Obviously, if you care about your privacy, you want to know which RPCs are not tracking you, which ones aren't logging anything, and which ones are respecting your privacy. All right, so Achal here, who's a design at Paradigm, announced that Paradigm is sponsoring OrcWeb and Jake to build open source libraries to accelerate Web3 front-end development. This is really cool because front-end development doesn't really get too much love in the crypto ecosystem, unfortunately. Well, now Paradigm is sponsoring Tom Miga and Jake Moxie to focus full-time on WAGMI, or We Are Gonna Make It, which is a front-end development framework, I believe, for Ethereum and other networks here. So this is really cool. I love to see these VCs and these funds put more money back into the ecosystem, especially the public goods, so to speak, or the open source public goods that people are building. And I've spoken about, how Paradigm does this before with a bunch of other things. But I think that some people last week and maybe the week before were trying to paint Paradigm as some kind of, I guess, villain or something. I mean, I think it had to do with the FTX stuff, and obviously they're an investor in Flashbots as well, I believe. But I don't think Paradigm is a villain at all. I think that they really do care about the ecosystem. Yes, they're a VC, but they've given a lot of money and knowledge back to the ecosystem. Actually, no, that's what it was about Paradigm. It was the stuff around Nakula and the Reth client that they're building, the drama around that. But I discussed that last week. I'm not going to rehash it. But I do think they're a net positive for the ecosystem. I mean, as I said before, there's actually very few VCs and funds that I would ever say are net positive for the ecosystem because, I mean, just by virtue of incentives, most of them are extractive because they're VCs, they're funds, they're expecting a return on their investment. But I think that you can still be extractive to an extent, but then also give back to balance that out. Remember how I discussed those scales before? You can extract all this value in terms of funding things, getting access to obviously discounted tokens and stuff like that, right? But then if you balance it out by giving back, I think that once you kind of, I mean, it's hard to it's debatable what the exact balance is going to work out to be. But if you do attempt to make a balance there, I think it's much better than a lot of the other players in this ecosystem that we've seen, a lot of the other funds and VCs that just don't give anything back and just extract as much money as they can. They fund literal scams. They fund just really bad projects out there. And yes, as I said, Paradigm has funded questionable things before and outright frauds like FTX, obviously. But, I think that as a VC and as a fund, you're going to invest in so many things. Not everything is going to pan out. And that's not to say that I think that they didn't make a mistake investing in FTX. Obviously, they did, and they didn't just invest once. They invested over multiple rounds. But I think they're giving back a lot to the ecosystem. So I try not to kind of go after them or too hard or anything like that because I want them to keep giving back to the ecosystem. And I think they're doing a lot of great work within Ethereum and crypto more broadly. All right, so this was true on the November 26th, so 3 days ago now, but I said 300,000 ETH has been staked over the last 10 days. So there's a lot of ETH pouring into staking, and I think it's because of that APR bump that we've seen, which basically doubled APR if you're running MEV Boost and collecting the execution layer rewards of both MEV and normal tips. And I think the API is 8-9%, and it can go higher depending on if you want to do recursive staking, if there's token rewards. But I'm just talking like pure ETH denominated from staking, plus MEV boost, of course. I think MEV accounts for a lot of rewards there. But yeah, there seems to be a lot of ETH still entering staking here. Now, contrary to popular, I guess, narratives recently where people have been saying, oh, all these people are locked in staking and I feel sorry for them because withdrawals aren't enabled yet, blah, blah, blah. As I've said before, it's a completely voluntary thing. And, a lot of the network isn't locked into staking because right now, I think ST-ETH is only at a slight discount. R-ETH, I think, is not at a discount. CB-ETH is at a, I think 4 or 5% discount, so obviously not nothing. But if people really wanted to exit, they can if they're staked through those providers, right? The solo stakers, I haven't talked to not one, and I talked to a lot of solo stakers. I haven't spoken to one of them that gives a shit about withdrawals for anything other than being able to withdraw their rewards so they can pay their tax obligations. That's it. They don't want to withdraw their stake. They want to keep staking. And it's just funny how more and more stake enters the system, well, obviously people aren't concerned that they can't withdraw from the Beacon chain. And as I mentioned on Friday's Refuel, withdrawals are coming probably sooner than people think. We're probably going to get them in March or April, right? I'm not going to commit to that, but that's the signaling that I've seen. So if that happens, I mean, it's literally like 4 or 5 months away. It's not that long. But as I said, like no one's banging at the gates for withdrawals. The only reason people would be banging at the gates for withdrawals that I've seen, and not because, and it's not because people want to withdraw their ETH. It's because they want to withdraw their ETH from centralized providers and go to decentralized ones because of the censorship concerns, because of the centralization of state concerns, because of the fallout of FTX as well, the custody concerns, right? So they want to go a step further, and they actually want to contribute more to the Ethereum network in terms of decentralization and security. They don't want to exit staking and just sell their ETH and go on their merry way. And the funniest thing is that if you were to look at it from a pure profit perspective, the first stakers got into staking ETH. I think ETH was like $400 to $500, and then the majority of them have staked. The majority of them have staked their ETH at prices that were much higher than that, and prices that are much higher than where they are today. So unless you think these people are going to unstake their ETH, capitulate on them, and just sell, then I think that it's a bit stupid to think that like we're going to have this massive kind of thing where people are clamoring at the gates to get their ETH, which they haven't been. I haven't seen it personally, but yeah, just cool to see more ETH being staked, of course, and obviously, actually, I should mention as well, I do say it's cool to see more ETH staked, but I think Superfizz had a great tweet out the other day that I don't have up here. He said, it doesn't matter if more ETH is staked, if it goes into centralized providers. It doesn't really add much decentralization or security to the network. And obviously, it's subjective about how much it adds, but like, for example, if all the ETH staked is going into Lido, which already has 30% of the network, is that really better than all the stake going into Rocket Pool, all the stake being staked by solo stakers? I would argue that it doesn't really add much marginal. Maybe it adds some marginal security and decentralization to Ethereum going with Lido, but that ETH going and staking as a solo staker adds much more decentralization to the network. Maybe security is debatable because obviously you have to debate what you have to define what security is to you in the context of proof of stake. But and I'm not going to go into that now. But in terms of decentralization, fuck yeah, solo stakers add way more decentralization than going with a big staking provider does. So Superfizz hits the nail on the head there by saying it's not all created equal. And I don't have a breakdown of what this 300,000 ETH went into, but yeah, it's kind of hard to know as well because sometimes it looks like solo staking, but maybe it's not. Maybe the address hasn't been tagged correctly. It's going to be impossible to know the full makeup of the network, in terms of solo stakers, but I think generally we have a pretty good idea of what it looks like right now with centralized providers and stuff like that. So yeah, just thought it was worth mentioning there. But also speaking of Ethereum staking, Masio, I've said the name wrong again, I'm sorry, put out another tweet thread where he said, in case anyone is wondering, the new Radxa Rock5 board can easily handle a fully subscribed ETH node with hundreds of validators. It's a powerful little guy. You can effectively run an infinite number of validators on sub $400 hardware with plenty of headroom left over. And he shows some Grafana dashboards here with statistics around this, and then names the hardware. So the hardware here is the computer here, $220, which is the Rock5 Model B, which you can see here, and then also the SSD, which is only $166. But obviously, prices will vary depending on where you are. This is obviously USD prices in the US, and software running Geth for execution, Nimbus for consensus, and Rocket Pool for client management. This is awesome. I mean, anyone who tells you that you can't run a Ethereum full node on consumer hardware is just brain dead, because you can, and then you can run like many validators off of that, which is amazing because you can basically have this small little PC. I mean, look at it, right? Like you all know what a Raspberry Pi looks like. So if you're not watching the video and listening in, it's the same thing. Like you can see right here, it's just a normal board, Rock5 Model B. It's super tiny. Obviously, connecting an SSD to it increases its footprint a bit. But still, you can probably get an enclosure for it, make it all nice and compact, and you can just have that sitting on your desk, making no noise, with subscribe to 100 validators, right? Having 100 validators spun up on it, 1,000 validators spun up on it, and have your own proof of stake farm, so to speak. Now, imagine doing that with proof of work. You wouldn't be able to do it on your desk. You wouldn't even be able to do it in your room. You wouldn't even be able to do it in your house to get the equivalent of what you get with doing like 1,000 validators. You would have to have a massive warehouse full of, full of lots and lots of these miners. They would make so much noise, use so much electricity, be so much waste, so much maintenance and overhead. It's just night and day difference, right? And I like I remember I showed it's probably a few months ago now when Superfizz was doing his showcase of people staking at home. There was one where it was basically showing a proof of stake box, a NUC, next to a proof of work kind of a setup. It wasn't obviously in a warehouse, it was just a rack, a proof of work rack, and just showing the difference. And it reminded me of like the IBM big mainframes from back in the day, and now the smartphone, which basically obliterates that, right? The footprint is just so much smaller. So yeah, I mean, this is the evolution here. This is just another reason why proof of stake is so amazing. All right, just a thread here I wanted to highlight, technical one, very short thread about the EVM storage. So if you're interested in learning more about EVM storage, as I said, it's a short thread. You can give it a read here from Blaine. He goes through slots, bits, bytes, and gas refunds, and how is storage structured and accessed in the EVM. So it's a thread accompanied by graphics that you can see here, which, I mean, as I said, pretty technical, unless you know what you're looking at here, or unless you know a little bit about the Ethereum technicals and the EVM and stuff like that. You probably won't understand what's happening here, but still, it's something I wanted to highlight for you, which I'll link in the YouTube description below. All right, last up, a discussion around ETH and maybe making you a little bit bullish. So I said the effects of the merge plus EIP 1559 play out against USD in bull markets and against other assets, especially BTC, in bear markets. Last bear market, 2018/2019, the ETH BTC ratio crashed 87% from the 2018 top. This bear market in 2022, ETH BTC is only down 20% from the 2021 top, and I believe it's down even less than that today. And then I said this is ultrasound money. Now, I do want to say that the 2018 top was actually lower than the 2017 top on the ETH BTC ratio. If you take the 2017 top on ETH BTC, I believe it went down 95% or something like that against BTC. So obviously an incredible drop, right? But now, in this current bear market, ETH is not doing what people thought it was going to do, what a lot of people thought it was going to do. And BTC is not doing what a lot of people thought it was going to do. Typically, the line of thinking was that BTC is the flight to safety in a bear market, BTC dominance goes up in a bear market, and everything else craters against that. Well, that might be true for the majority of assets, because the majority of assets in crypto are dog shit anyway. But for ETH, it is not true at all. As I said, ETH BTC is only down 20%, which is nothing. I mean, when you think about percentages on the downside, 95% down is a world away from 20% down. Like, it's not even in the same realm of things. To recover from a 20% down movement, you don't have to increase by that much to recover from that. I don't have the math handy. I'm not going to try and do head math here. But to recover from like a 95% drop, you need to I can do a 95% drop. So just say, I'll do it in dollar terms because it's easier to explain. Just say you have $100, you lose 95% of it, it's at $5. To recover from a 95% drop, you have to 20x from there. So you have to go up 2,000% to recover from a 95% drop, right? Similar. So when to recover from a 20% drop, that would be from $100 to $80. You only need to go up by I'm gonna screw up the math here. If I try to do head math, I believe it's 25% or something like that. Something really, really small. So it's a world away from 2,000%, right? And as I said, the math is not exact, but it's along the same line of thinking there. So when you look at it like that, ETH BTC being down 20% is basically noise. It's nothing. And I don't believe that's going to last very long. I do believe ETH BTC is going to keep trending up from here, obviously. So as I said, that's where the effects of the merge and EIP 1559 are playing out. Now, the fact that we're net deflationary since 1559 went live and still since the merge went live, and the fact that the merge reduced issuance by so much, and we have that structural sell pressure evaporated, whereas Bitcoin still has to deal with the structural sell pressure from miners. A lot of miners are capitulating right now. It's putting a lot of downward pressure on BTC. And I think that is the main reason why ETH BTC hasn't crashed like it has in the past. And it's actually, it only has to go up a little bit more for it to outperform, right, in 2022 and even into next year. So when taking that all together, it's hard not to be bullish on ETH because people are going to see this. It's going to like shatter the narrative that BTC is the flight to safety. So people are going to be like, okay, well, going into ETH isn't actually that risk on compared to BTC. It's actually potentially even less risky than going into BTC, because if ETH outperforms BTC in both bull and bear markets, then what's the point of holding BTC as a hedge or as a risk hedge against going further down the risk curve? ETH becomes that. And ETH fills that role. So you may as well just hold ETH instead of BTC. And that's at least the way I look at it. It's not investment advice, but I think when you think about it like that, it makes total sense. And you can hold BTC for other reasons, but I'm just talking in the context of holding it as the safest asset in crypto, which I've always believed is kind of crap, because the safest asset in crypto has always been stablecoins, right? USD stablecoins. I guess like they're not traditional crypto, but yeah, this bear market has shattered all of those narratives. There are a lot of people coping over this. I think right now they expected BTC dominance to shoot up. They expected ETH BTC to crash. Well, no, that hasn't happened. Even though ETH has gone down to, I think it was 0.055. So it went down more than where it is today. It's at 0.073, the ETH BTC ratio. But that was on the massive sell-off from 3AC, fallout, and selling off the ST ETH and putting downward pressure on ETH. But ETH recovered from that very, very quickly because people bought it. There is a lot of demand there for it. BTC set a new low recently. ETH has not set a new low yet. Still, I mean, who knows if it will or won't. But yeah, I think taking all that into account, very hard not to be bullish on ETH against BTC, let alone USD, right? But with that, I'm going to leave it at that for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give that video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.